Always takes a couple of seconds.
And I'm operating with one screen today, which is why I'm looking down right now. So if we need to share anything, I may ask you to do it.
I'll try to.
My external monitors are not working currently.
And we are live on YouTube as well.
Yay! Hello, YouTube people, all my effect enjoyers, welcome.
Welcome, everyone. How's it going? Who we have in chat today? Let's see.
I already told Mattia, but if it looks like I'm looking down the whole time, it's because my external monitors are not working. So I'm operating off my MacBook today. So it's not you, it's me.
With a change of perspective.
That's right. All right. What are we talking about today, folks? Anybody have anything they want us to talk about? Oh, there's already a bunch of stuff in here.
Let's see.
When should I pick RPC over HTTP API? So Sebastian had a good answer in Discord, which was that if you need your APIs to be HTTP semantic, well understood, outside of the generated RPC client, used by more than just your own internal application boundaries, you should probably be using an HTTP API. Otherwise, RPC is fine. But FIWS said, I want to know when to use RPC specifically. You told me when I should pick HTTP API, but I don't know why I want to use RPC in the first place, if that makes sense. I think one good reason to use RPC is if you want agnosticism over your protocol and your serialization layer. Like HTTP is very specific to HTTP as a protocol. You can obviously like serialize your data however you want, but the protocol is HTTP. For RPC, you have the flexibility of picking whatever protocol you want. And also the serialization layer can be whatever you want. So, I mean, I think I usually, for like external facing APIs, I generally default to HTTP API. But for machine to machine communication that I control, if it doesn't need to be externally available, RPC is usually fine. Especially because that lets me like swap out the, like I said, the protocol and serialization layers whenever I want. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if Mattia, if you have any opinions on this.
Yeah, I was about to say exactly what you ended up with, which is basically usually if I don't care about it is internal data, internal like communication, I don't care about exposing. Usually RPC is good. Whereas whenever you need something that you eventually plan on exposing to someone else, maybe that's definitely HTTP API. Just because, for example, you get OpenAPI docs for free with HTTP API. If you go with RPC, you would have to. There is already like some specific semantics that affect encodes over the RPC that, for example, there are ping messages for long streams or things like that you would have to explain to someone else if you expose the APIs to potentially third parties. Whereas if you just use that internally and that's really it, I'd say that RPC probably it's better, probably. But again, depends again on the entire use case, on whatever you plan on exposing or not.
Yep, I think that just about sums it up. on when you would use one over the other. Anybody else have any questions? I guess in the meantime, we can talk about what we've been working on with V4. So one of the things we're trying to do to prep for a release candidate is kind of leveraging AI pretty heavily to sort of like adversarially review all of the different modules. The problem being that in doing that, we keep getting blocked by the different providers like safety guardrails, because you're not supposed to use them for what is it called, like security exploits.
Yeah. But we are not doing that.
I mean, like, some of it is, I guess, like, we're not trying to exploit effect. We're trying to figure out how somebody could exploit effect.
Could exploit, yeah. We are attempting to do exactly the opposite, to be honest.
So, like, I guess explaining that to the model is pretty difficult. But we are going to try, like, using Kimi K3 for some of this, because it has less of those guardrails, but is still pretty good at helping us to make sure that effect is really, really hardened by the time that it comes out. And it's not just like security things. Like we're trying to figure out bugs that exist in the current APIs, and like just a variety of different things. So like I said, kind of like adversarial code review. Yeah. Like semantics that are encoded in the APIs that might not be correct, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing we're doing. What else? I feel like there's a lot going on in V4 right now. We're trying to figure out, so I've been working a little bit on a bot to help us with code review. We're not like super satisfied with any of the bots that exist out there. They're not like specific enough for our use case, use cases. And we also wanted an opportunity to play around with Alchemy from Sam, who I think we had on office hours a while back, right? Did I make that up?
I think so, yeah.
So I've been sort of playing around with that, because the work in the effect repo has now gotten even more complicated. We have a V3 branch and a V4 like on main that we have to manage, and the pull requests and issues and things like that get opened up. We don't have a lot of automation around those things right now to help label them for us and things like that. So anyway, we're toying around with stuff that can help us with code review and whatnot. I think we installed Code Rabbit on the repository in the interim to try to like just help us with reviewing things. But yeah, that's another thing we're working on to try to like help with the review burden, trying to figure out like strategies around that. What else? What else are we doing? Nothing. Just sitting on our hands.
I think that if we don't have question, maybe it could be also might be interesting also for people who doesn't have followed the V3 versus V4 beta story, just to tell a little about what they could expect in V4 coming from V3. If we don't have any questions.
Yeah, or if anybody has any questions, like Matthias said, feel free to either pop them in Discord or drop them in the YouTube or my Twitch chat, and we'll see them. But yeah, I guess in the interim, we can, in lieu of any community questions, we can talk about like some of the things in V4 that are changing. Mattia, I don't know if you had something in mind that you wanted to talk about.
Not yet, but we could look into it.
I'm very excited about my CLI.
Oh yeah.
Because people have been asking, 99% of users were blocked on upgrading to V4 because wizard mode didn't exist in the CLI. And so over I think it was this weekend or maybe it was last week, I forget. I did a bunch of PRs against CLI to introduce a couple of new features that folks had been asking for.
I think it was the weekend just passed.
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember, but like being able to remove global flags and things like that. But even more than that, I can show off maybe wizard mode a little bit. I have a little demo CLI. Hang on. Let me pull down all the changes.
Yeah.
And make sure I share the right editor. Don't want to leak all my secrets.
Yeah. All of your API secrets.
That's right.
A $5 billion LLM API key.
That would be interesting. All right, let's see. Share. Okay, you should be able to see NeoVim.
Yeah.
Tell me if I full screen this, tell me if it like disappears. Hang on. Can I even do that right now? Nope, I can't. Interesting.
Can you
wait, full screen? I will, but
okay, yeah.
You can still see it, right?
Yeah, I can still see it. Try to move. Yeah, okay. We can see it.
All right. So let's make a new TMUX session, and maybe I can show. So in the scratch pad here, I made like a little demo CLI that just like exercises a bunch of the effect CLI options. And I was pretty happy with the concept of wizard mode in Effect V3. Like I liked the fact that you could like have somebody go through your CLI who didn't know anything about it, and they would automatically get like it would just guide them through it. And even for agents, I think it's like somewhat useful, although most of the time agents will just inspect your help docs, which is also generated by the CLI. So like I think effect CLIs are like very good for agents to use. I think we can do better. I think there's I forget the name of the framework that's out there right now, but there's one that's like very good for agents. Oh god, I can't remember the name of it. Maybe somebody
Cobra?
can. No, there's Sebastian had told me that we should introduce some of those features too, and I forget what the name of the CLI framework was. I'll remember it at some point. Incur. Yeah, because it has like some features that are really cool, and I think we could like learn some stuff from them. But anyway, if we take a look at the new wizard mode, I think it's pretty interesting. So Scratchpad wizard. So one thing is you can still invoke wizard mode via the flag, which is nice, right? And it'll guide you through the CLI just like V3 did. But I think that just like we improved the output of help documentation and prompting and whatever, I wanted to also improve the wizard like UI a little bit. So anyway, now it kind of guides you through, we're at the root command right now. It'll guide me through this. So again, these are just like random, like little commands that don't do anything. But as you pick options and arguments for a given command, it'll take you through all of the things that you have to select, and then it'll like keep track of the command and show you like where you're at. And then again, like you can keep going through a given command, like the subcommands. So like we can, I don't know, click deploy to production. Do we want to set the number of replicas? Yes. How many replicas do we want to set to? Do we want to set deployment tags? Yeah, let's make maybe 2. And then it'll like ask you for each one. So A, B, C, D, F. Do we want to dry run? No. And again, it keeps track of the command. So as you like finish picking options for a given command. It'll keep showing you where you're at. And then
That's nice.
you get to positional arguments, and you can, say my super cool service. And then you can either run the command when you're done or not. So again, the experience is very similar to V3, where you get guided through the CLI, and then you can run the command at the end if you want to. But I think the UI is maybe just a little bit better than it was in V3. So yeah, we can run the command, and we'll see like it just logs out stuff. But what's different in V4 is, and I've been asked about this a couple of different times, is people wanted the ability to trigger wizard mode programmatically from a command handler. So if you define like a particular command, people wanted the ability to like trigger it programmatically. And now you can. So if you yield command.wizard on the particular command that you want to invoke the wizard for, it'll guide you through like the wizard for that particular command. So you can do this for like the root, you can do this for like other commands. But yeah, so you can actually do this programmatically now. It's still like it's not like a perfectly polished feature yet. So if folks do use it and they notice like weird stuff, definitely let me know. But I think that it's already better than it was in V3. And again, like these CLIs help documentation is much better in V4, I think.
I still miss the spacing that was there in V3.
Don't troll me, Mattia. Don't troll me. There's so many Twitter threads where I got trolled by people where they'd respond to me and it would just be like double spaced Twitter response. Like anyway, so yeah, I think, and one other thing that you can do now that you couldn't do before in V4 specifically. In V3 this was possible, but in V4 you can, let's go back to the Scratchpad wizard. You can provide, so I introduced this like CLI config layer, kind of like what we had in V3. So yeah, CLI config.layer. Right now there's only one option in here, which is the built-ins that you want to include. So by default, all of the built-in commands are included in the CLI. So like when you run the help docs, you can see like all of the global built-ins are included in the help. But if I provide this layer to them with none of the built-ins, CLI config, in theory,
They disappear.
what did I do?
They disappeared, right?
Yes, but I don't know why. Oh, right, because I removed the help. Hang on. Bill, global flag. Global flag dot.
Help. Yeah. They disappeared too much.
Too much disappeared. Yeah, so now
Okay.
you only have the one. There's I think there's also like helpers in here. What did I do? I forget what I did in here the other week. There is there's a built-ins array. So like, let's say you want to remove one built-in, you could do like global flag built-ins filter flag equal to, I don't know, let's say you want to implement your own version command. So you can filter out the version flag. Why is that?
Because you have the opposite, yeah.
I'm doing so good this morning. It's amazing. Anyway, so now you can actually implement your own like version flag if you want to. It won't get overridden by the global one. And the nice thing about this like CLI config layer is we can add other configuration over time to this without like breaking backward compatibility. So that was kind of the purpose of having this layer in V3 as well, is that we could add configuration options for the CLI without breaking backward compatibility. Obviously, these could all be their own individual layers, but it kind of like feels nice to just have a single config layer, in my opinion.
It also allows you to fix and definitely decide I want this set and that's it. So if we eventually add other ones, your CLI will be still fixed on those ones, which is nice.
Yeah, so like that's there were a couple of other things I added. I don't remember. Let me look at effect. Let me look at the repo really quick and just see.
Yep.
Is PR author me? And now that we're labeling things, label CLI. Oh, I didn't label the PRs. Whoops.
Oops.
Is closed. So there was built-in flags, wizard mode. There was a fix related to like missing flags or missing CLI flag value handling. Anyway, there were a couple of like improvements to the CLI that I introduced that I thought were cool.
Yeah.
What's our favorite module? I don't know, Mattia, what's your favorite module?
Graph.
Oh God! Don't give Sebastian a big head.
Well, no, well, that's actually true because, like, in the Effect LSP JavaScript version before Graph landed, I had my crappy version of a graph, and like it was nice to switch that out in place for the actual effect graph, which also like Lloyd, remember now that now Graph has set operators as well. I've looked into that as well, like unions, like intersections, which are nice indeed. But yeah, but Graph has those utilities for traversal, for printing. For example, if you use the classic TypeScript LSP and you hover a layer, all of the rendering of the layer as a mermaid is actually powered by the effect graph module. So here I have some graph related structures in your code base. I definitely recommend that. Definitely. Without joking. And what about yours?
Yeah, I'm trying to decide what my favorite module is.
So there are multiple.
What yeah, well, I'm trying to think like what module feels the best when I import it, and I'm just like, yeah, I can't wait to use this. Let me think. I don't know, I'm not sure yet right off the bat. I mean, obviously I'm a big fan of the CLI, but that's not like an individual module, it's a collection of modules.
Yeah, I say that still counts as a module. It's more like a set of features.
I don't know what my favorite module is. The effect module.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know why, but cron keeps getting mentioned as the best module. Indeed. It's very suspicious.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to see if there's any other questions that came up in our channel. Oh God, I lost the office hours channel. Where are you? There.
Yeah, and as Federico said, the effect module itself. Yeah.
Exactly. See? Great minds think alike. What else is cool in V4?
Well, I would say that sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Mattia. Sorry, I had another idea, but I can wait.
I would say that if you come from V3, one thing that I really love about V4 compared to V3 is the overall experience in defining services and layers. Because I think that compared to what we had in V3, where that we had like, I think it was 3 or 4 different ways to define service and its eventually connected layers. I think that we had effect.service, context tag, effect.tag, and manually creating the context tag plus the layer, I think, so that they counted like as 4 different ways to define a layer. I think that the V4 way of basically having, I'd say, at most 2 ways of defining that, because you can use the context service and provide just the shape at type level and then manually create the layer, or have the variant that allows you to infer from the result of make. I think it's really nice, and it's definitely an improvement over the way more variants that accumulated over time in V3, which is really, really nice. And I'd say that pretty a game changer for that.
I wanted to show some other stuff. So, okay. Some other cool stuff that we've introduced. Can I share the same thing? Why does it not show up unless I minimize this window? God. Okay, 1 second. Window, this one, share. And then I have to maximize it, full screen. Okay. So in V4, we did a bunch of work. We did a bunch of work on metrics as well, because as part of trying to make V4 small, we took a look at every module and tried to figure out how we could shrink said module down to a minimum footprint for what we needed for the runtime. And then like you can add features over time to your app as you want, but like the things that are included in the runtime by default should be extremely minimal. So one of the things that we shrunk down was metrics and the way that they work, which is pretty cool. The way that metrics are defined and included in the application are cool now, but because we like kind of reworked a lot of the way that like metrics are used in effect apps, we were able to also improve like the consumption of metrics from different backends. So one such like example of that is for those of you who are using OTLP ingestion for ingesting like traces and things like that. Most OTLP layers would also like support ingesting metrics. And in V3, we had no, as far as I remember, we didn't have a way to ingest metrics into backends that preferred delta temporality as opposed to cumulative temporality. So like Datadog, Dynatrace, and there's a few other providers out there that prefer metrics that are exported with a delta temporality in their OTLP like ingestion layer. But now you can actually do it with just a single like variable as you're setting up your OTLP metrics, which is pretty cool. And similarly, like if you want to have Prometheus style metrics using the OTLP layer, in effect, you can do that and just set the temporality to cumulative, which is also the default. So you don't have to even really set it. But while the OTLP metrics module is very cool, and all of like these kind of like built-in OTLP modules are really cool because you don't need OpenTelemetry as a dependency. I also think for folks who are using Prometheus, for example, to scrape metrics in their like Kubernetes clusters or in some other environment where you're exposing Prometheus metrics, maybe from your HTTP API or something like that, which is a pretty common use case if you're scraping, as opposed to like pushing metrics. I built this Prometheus metrics module, which is meant to allow you to expose your application's metrics in a Prometheus format. So you can do, I forget where the layer is. Hang on. Layer. Oh yeah, I built this layer that specifically is designed to allow you to just have a /metrics endpoint in your HTTP APIs. So basically, like I said, I think OTLP has become very popular and is like probably what most folks are familiar with at this point, where like you push metrics from your application into some exporter that ingests those metrics. But also, like in the past, scraping metrics from a Prometheus compatible endpoint was also an equally popular method for getting metrics from your app. And a lot of other ecosystems made this very easy. So like, for example, I came from a place where a lot of Java and Scala was being used for application level code. And so me as like a DevOps engineer would just configure our Prometheus deployment to scrape the metrics endpoints that were automatically exposed from those applications, because those ecosystems made it really easy. And now the same like ease is like just present in V4. So you can create a Prometheus metrics layer and customize the path and the prefix and everything like that. But this will automatically like expose a endpoint in your HTTP API that when you hit, it just renders the Prometheus metrics as text so that it can be scraped. And I think this is pretty cool. We never had this before, and so like I don't know, I thought that was like a very interesting thing. And at some point this metric name mapper thing was added, so you can like add metric name mapping functionality to your Prometheus metrics. But anyway,
another thing that I think it's really nice that was added in V4 is the OTLP layer that reads the standard env configuration names that are suggested by the OTLP standards, and so that you do not have to actually hard code your settings in your app or create your own mappings between the config and variables into your layer. You can just, I think it's layer from config, something like that. It's in the OTLP package, and that basically relies on using the standard OTLP conventions for env variable, and that means that you can just provide that layer into your application with basically no config, and then rely on the environment where you run your application to actually provide, if you want to enable or not, telemetry collector, which is the collector endpoint, and things like that. If you want to enable or not the metrics, where they should be pushed, things like that, which is really nice when you are playing around in some code that actually runs the same both in your dev environment and your actual runtime production environment, because then you can have like your local dev environment to automatically set those up for you. So regardless of where you are running that, you actually need 0 code changes, and that runs as is.
Yeah, I mean, I think also metrics in general are just an underutilized feature in effect at the moment. I think it would be really cool to see more folks registering metrics in their Effect app and like giving us feedback on the V4 APIs. I think there's a lot that could be improved, but I think that we'll need more usage to figure out like what the right balance of combinators and whatnot is. But anyway, I'm excited about metrics in V4 because I spent a lot of time trying to polish this API. And I'm specifically excited about like the more infrastructure-y pieces that were added. So yeah.
And that will And I would also say that connected to that, to like usage from everyone in the Effect community, I would also remember that if you have some like weird behavior that you encounter, or some API that you're not fully happy with, or whatever, the clock is ticking. So if you're using V4 beta, you should submit your feedback right now, because eventually we will be out of beta. So I think that the clock is ticking, and if you have your feedback, uh, it's almost now or never.
Also, I mean, yes, especially for the stable modules, it'll be a little
Yeah,
bit harder for us to make breaking changes to those once we're in a release candidate. I mean, in a stable release phase. But obviously, the unstable modules, we still reserve the right to do things that are more breaking. But another thing I would like kind of poll / query the community on. One thing that we're interested in doing is trying to improve our AI SDK in like comprehensively. So just taking another comprehensive look at the APIs and trying to figure out how we can improve things. You know, the original design I was striving for with the AI SDKs is you write your code in a provider agnostic fashion, and then you inject the provider later. It's kind of like very effect native feeling, like the provider just becomes a dependency that you inject. But I worry that like just makes the API feel not great to use. I mean, obviously there's issues with like the schemas and things like that. And so we're moving towards maintaining our own smaller subset of schemas for like the language model and things like that. And for now, we'll continue maintaining the generated clients, but the generated clients like won't be used for like language model in the future. Like we'll just have a minimal subset of schemas that we need to implement those things, which should hopefully help with all of the weird schema incompatibilities and the fact that these providers can't figure out how to design an open API spec. But I'm interested in getting feedback from the community in general about what they like, what they don't like. Be as critical as possible, because I think pretty soon I'm going to take a very holistic look at the AI SDKs, and try to figure out a better API if there is one. And yes, we'll add more providers and more features over time. But the whole reason I didn't add 12 providers right now is because I wasn't fully sold that this was the right API, and I did not want to have to refactor 12 providers. You know, I'm only one person. You know, at the same time before we decided that was the API that we were happy with. So, yes, I know AI exists, but like we have a high bar for the code that makes it into effect. So, you know, like I'm not just gonna like vibe code this AI SDK entirely, but
it would be like funny because the AI SDK being written by the AI itself.
So one thing that one thing I would ask is like if you folks have used our AI SDKs and you are unhappy with one thing or another, please post some feedback in the AI channel in our Discord. I'd be happy to like evaluate it there. You know, the YouTube chat goes away, so it's not useful for me to like collate feedback. But if you post something in the AI channel in Discord, I'll at least have a record of it. I see Robert asking about real-time APIs. Yes, I know that those are features that we want to add over time, but again, that's like features. I'm specifically asking for feedback on like the design of the API in general. Like, yeah, we'll add providers, we'll add other features to the AI SDK over time, but like, what feels good about using it right now and what does not is kind of what I'm asking for V4.
Yeah.
What else can we talk about?
I saw that was a question. I saw some big changes landed recently on HTTP API. Any comment on what the path to getting that plus HTTP client out of stable? Just wondering if it's on the horizon at all. Well, I would say, sorry, did I
I
interrupt
think
with you?
no, I think the big changes that were made were more Julio optimizing type
Mm,
level performance, because
yeah.
the type level performance was pretty awful on the HTTP API, and
Mhm.
Julio took like a full week working with his agent and like substantially improved type level performance for HTTP API, like substantially improved that.
Yeah.
But I don't think we made, I mean, yes, there's a change between V3 and V4 in how you define HTTP APIs. But if you're already on V4, I don't think there were any major changes
Mhm.
recently that I
Yeah.
know of.
If you come from V3, you'll find quite a few changes on how you define HTTP API, and that's again expected because we have like expanded the set of features that HTTP API supports. Like for example, I remember we added streaming support that wasn't a thing in V3, but also now the HTTP APIs are. I'd say that they are more aligned to what OpenAPI spec allows. So basically, I'd say that right now almost everything you can define with an OpenAPI you can define with an HTTP API. I would say at least all of the use cases that comes to my mind they are supported. So that's why coming from V3 you'll find some changes, but I'd say that they are not like an entire revamp of the system. They are mostly like experience wise and like adjustments, like for example things like that they expected a single schema that needed to be unioned before. Now they come in as an array or things like that.
Yeah.
But nothing like breaking like the whole experience has changed or a new concept needs to be learned. They have been changed basically in order to adjust to that idea.
Yeah, I think that I really like the way in V4 that you define middleware.
Mm,
It's really nice. It literally is
mm,
just like a chain of. It feels like you're just defining a chain of effects, which you are,
mm,
and that's really nice.
yeah.
Like let me pull up. I wrote a little piece of documentation recently on something that tripped me up.
Yeah. It's the fact that now you can even chain middlewares, which is like
Yeah, like you can
insane.
define a middleware that depends on a previous middleware, which is really
Yeah.
nice. Interdependent. Here we go. How do I share my screen? Share. Stop sharing. Share screen. Chrome tab. Nope, that doesn't work. Okay, cool. This will work. Share.
Yes.
So, this interdependent middleware section that I wrote recently kind of demonstrates like how you can have two middlewares that depend on one another. I think the thing that tripped me up
So if
is
you can
that.
just bump a little there, you can
Oh, sorry.
just bump it a little font. Yeah. Okay, that's perfect.
I'll do one more. I think the thing that tripped me up was that you need to, when you're defining middleware that depends on a previous middleware, it's like layers. So when you compose the middleware together, the load auth, like in this case, let's look at the actual middleware definitions here. So load auth is a middleware that provides to like the effect that it provides to the effect that generates the HTTP response an auth info object here. And then we have the auth info just has like a user ID in here. So load auth provides auth info, and then there's a second middleware called require auth, which requires auth info and produces nothing, right? This is a contrived example, but I think it gets the point across. We have two middleware where require auth depends on what load auth like provides. when you actually compose the middleware together, the ordering matters. Just kind of like with layers, right? So load auth provides auth info, and require auth reads auth info. So require auth has to appear first in the list of middlewares, and then load auth is the second one. So it's like one is providing to the other. But by doing this, you can now like define middleware that depends on one another. So this is again a contrived example, but load auth provides you get an effect here that comes in. It's just a function that receives the effect, and this effect is the thing that is the effect that generates the HTTP response, right? So the result of this effect is, I think HTTP, I forget if it's HTTP API response or HTTP service response, whatever. But you provide to that effect the auth info. And then again, the second middleware that comes in here is a method where you can actually yield the auth info that was provided first. So it's kind of like, it's really nice. It feels like you're literally just chaining effects together in the middleware that you're defining.
Yeah, it's a middleware, but actually it's kind of providing layers, because at the end you are defining basically a middleware kind of what it was a layer that eventually like provides as output the next effect to execute in the
And even
the
like, if I look at the little tool that I've been working on recently, I think I have an example of a middleware here.
But the nice thing is also that there is no like limit in how much you can chain them. For example, you can imagine like scenarios where you take advantage of the middlewares to do a lot of stuff. Like for example, you can, as you have shown off, load an identity for the user and then load the actual user data for that identity in another middleware. Or you can have another middleware that, based on data that could be annotated into your endpoints, can perform the privacy and the security checks for that endpoint to see if you can actually perform over that endpoint. You can load maybe a tenant over an header that's provided to your requests or things like that. Then the fact that they can chain is amazing.
Yeah, like here I've got a webhook API I'm defining right now. It just has a GitHub webhook endpoint, but there's a webhook middleware that I put in here. And if we look at source, API, source, webhooks, no, sorry, packages, domain, source. Where did I define this? Source. Sorry, I shouldn't navigate in, here we go. This GitHub webhook middleware is basically the middleware that does the webhook signature validation, right? So if we look at how the signature validation actually works, so that API package is just defining the spec for the API, but then when you actually implement it, you actually like implement the API. And so if we look at the actual bot application, I think GitHub, where did I define the webhooks HTTP API GitHub? In here, there's this GitHub webhook middleware layer, which implements the GitHub webhook middleware. And what's cool is you can define you can define this layer just like you would define any others, right? You can have an effect that yields a bunch of setup stuff. So you could yield services in here, you could yield configuration, whatever, and this will all run once. And then you return the function that gets the effect that is going to eventually generate the response. And you can do stuff with it, right? So in here, I get the server request, I decode the server headers, get the signature, validate the signature, and then I return the effect if the signature is valid. So the middleware in V4 just feels a lot more natural. Like once you like wrap your head around like this, defining a spec separate from the implementation. And the thing about defining the spec independent of the implementation of the API is that then it allows you to generate typed clients. So like if you have a front end that you want to communicate with your Effect HTTP API powered backend, and you have a shared package that like defines the spec, you can then generate a client on the front end just by passing it the spec. So that's kind of what's nice about HTTP API as well, is like, and it's the same in V3, but like, I just feel like the middleware story is so much better in V4. So
Definitely. And also, we have got a question: are there any good resources for testing HTTP API endpoints and middleware? I would say that maybe I can share. Let me check. HTTP API, yes. Another great resource. Let me zoom in, maybe. No, opposite. Okay. Another great thing that
you might want to do a tick or two more.
Sorry. Yeah. Yes, I think now it's good.
Yeah, it's good.
What do you think? Okay. So regarding testing HTTP API, one thing that's amazing is that you can use a module called HTTP API test. And with HTTP API test, what you can do, you can basically grab some of the groups in your HTTP API definition, and then provide them the implementation for them. And then you get back a client that basically is running your HTTP API in memory without having to set up the whole server and client stuff, and basically communicating with that, which is, I think, amazing in order to perform tests. Because again, any other like framework in order to test your API, you need to actually spawn them up. But with Effects HTTP API, actually, you don't need that. You can just rely on the fact that you can run them in memory, and it will create ephemeral HTTP request, ephemeral HTTP response, and then run them basically in memory. So that is, again, I think a great addition, a great story that, if I recall correctly, there wasn't in V3, if I recall correctly. I may be wrong on that.
I don't think there was. I think it's new in V4, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was added in May or something like that. Yeah.
There was a question about, do middlewares now have the option?
It may have been my fault that I have pressed the wrong stop button. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, it's okay. Folks, if you can hear us on YouTube, please let us know. Let us know if you can hear us on YouTube. Testing.
I'm sorry. Okay, we should be live again.
Thumbs down.
Can hear you. Okay. We're back. Sorry, my fault.
All right, that was it's minor technical difficulty. So yeah, well, there was a question about, can middleware have the option to require a certain input schema shape? It doesn't really make sense for middleware to have a specific input shape, because middleware can be attached to any HTTP API endpoint, group, or a full HTTP API. So like, there's no type safe way to really like do that. You get the request from like the middleware. So let me actually show an example here. Share. I'm not going to click the stop button. LOL.
Whoops.
Share. So where's the here? So in this example, you'll see that the effect I get is just actually, maybe I can pull this up in my actual editor. Hang on one sec. Stop. Where is it? It's in. Where are you? need to make this bigger. Okay, let me try to share this. Share screen, window, this window. Share. Should it show signature verification? Yes, it does. Okay. Now let's make it full screen, entire screen.
Yes, you're still there.
Okay. So yeah, there's no real way for us to say that a middleware has a particular input shape, like this effect that you get back, because a middleware is just a function that receives the effect that's going to generate the server response, right? This particular effect is the one that's going to be the thing. It's like the result of the handler, right? So like when you define the handler for your HTTP API endpoint, that effect that you've defined, that's what this is here. This is the effect that you've defined. And the reason you can't really have typed input here is because you can attach this middleware to that endpoint, or you can attach it to many endpoints, or you can attach it to a whole HTTP group or API, right? Like if I go to the spec for this source webhooks here. Right now, I just attached this middleware to this particular endpoint, but like theoretically, I could attach it to the full group, and that would mean this middleware would apply to every single endpoint in here that I define. Or I could take it even a step further and attach the middleware to the full HTTP API like I did here. So you can't really have typed input to a middleware because of that. Like you can type what a middleware requires and what it produces, which is what we do here. Where's the definition here? Like you would do that in the generic here. The requires, provides, or the client error. But there's not really a way for us to say the other stuff in here. Like you can't say, oh, this middleware has these parameters that because you could theoretically attach that middleware to a different endpoint that doesn't have those parameters, right? So what I do instead, like this GitHub verifier middleware does need, where are we? Let's go back to this GitHub middleware does need to read some stuff from, for example, like the server request, right? Like here, I need to read headers from the server request, and if I don't have these headers defined, like the signature header, then I need to fail with a bad request for any endpoint that this middleware gets attached to. You have to do that yourself in the middleware. There's not a type safe way for us to enforce that in the specification for an HTTP API.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think also, generally speaking, concept-wise, it makes sense to not have the middleware inject requirements of the shape, because then it's not a middleware anymore. Usually a middleware like takes something in, checks it, pass it down, and then pass it out again. And if you have to do checks on expected data that you need on the structure, probably that lives on the structure itself, not on the middleware. The middleware should just perform the action that it needs to, I think.
There's somebody in my Twitch chat who's asking if the category that I have myself registered on in Twitch means that I go on websites. I don't know what category I'm registered as. What software and game development? That category means that we talk about or develop software. Like that's what this category is. I'm not trying to be mean. Like the category literally means we talk about software or develop software to like and stream it. Let me know if that's not clear though. There's a couple of questions in the YouTube chat about layer naming conventions.
Yeah.
I have opinions on this because I think that I found a pattern that works well for me. Folks can like debate and argue and say one thing works better than another, but like for my application code, I've been tending to do something like the following. So if I have a service, so first of all, if I don't have a service and I'm defining a layer like this, where I'm like using an API to define a layer, right? And there's no way for me to attach this to a service or anything like that. I just suffix my layers with capital layer. This is the first convention, I will say. I've moved away from the like live suffix because I found, first of all, I hated live forever. Like I never liked live. This convention came from Scala, and actually even further than that from Zio. Where Zio, like the live service was meant to be like the live implementation, i.e. like the production one. But I hated this naming convention. So in V4, we've reverted to for like things like this, where it's an API that you return a layer from. That's like top level like this. I've been using like capital layer, so as my suffix. But if I have a service I'm building, and again, these are completely arbitrary like naming conventions. You could obviously define your own. There's no one thing that's better than another. But let's take a look at this GitHub events service, which is everything in here is broken because I'm like doing a ton of experimentation. But I have this GitHub events service here that I've defined, right? It's a context.service, and I have my make function in here, which doesn't have to be in here. You could extract make to its own top level method if you want to. It's up to you. But the convention that's been working for me is first, I define a layer that does not include any of the local dependencies of my service. So it's literally just the layer that is for that service constructor, right? And that's nice because like if in tests I want to swap in different layers, I can use GitHub events.layer no deps in my in the tests that need it, right? And then I can, provide whatever other implementations of layers that it needs that I want. And then I'll have like a static read-only layer, which does include the default services that I want that particular layer to use. So this way, in this way, I give myself options. You could also even like do static read-only layer mock, which we do like layer.mock GitHub webhook events or GitHub events, whatever I called this thing.
Can even do this, I think.
Oh yeah. So this is kind of nice, but I would only recommend this for application code and not library code, because attaching properties to your service like this is not tree shakeable. So like if you have a mock layer in here, it'll get included unless you like, even if you have like the best bundler on earth, this will still be included. Because most, like, I don't think there's any bundler that knows how to erase static properties properly.
I think that you cannot, because if you do that, you actually change the shape of the class
the prototype.
object, the class function. So yeah, so you would be breaking, if you do for any reason object.keys on the class itself, you would break that. So that's why it cannot be erased.
So the other option is like, if you want to avoid all the problems with static properties, you could just export them as top level things, layer.effect or GitHub events, GitHub events.make. The problem with this is that autocomplete like from other modules starts to get really complicated. Like if you start typing layer no deps, you'll get like, you see like a bunch of like imports from different modules. So that's why I choose to nest them as static properties, because then in other modules I can just do like GitHub events dot layer no deps, right? And that'll work. But again, like this is my convention, and for the layers that are associated with services like this, I tend to use the lowercase layer. But again, like these are my arbitrary naming conventions. This is working well for me. So your mileage may vary.
I'd say that usually I agree, and then that's a good naming convention. I've been like adopting myself after seeing you and others adopt it. But and usually the thing that I would say is that if I am running in a project that's, for example, backend only, I would go all in static properties. If I know that if I have to cross compile for the front end as well, for example, where maybe the bundle size is more like a problem, or where it's I needed to provide the same code that runs in multiple environments, and I don't want to leak the dependency or code that doesn't get used on a platform on another. I definitely go up for the top level exports.
Yeah.
Basically, because the issue again is that if you have that static read-only layer that maybe requires a Postgres client, and you ship that to the front end, you are basically bundling the Postgres client in the front end.
Even if you
which is
never
not
use it, you end up with code
Yeah.
that you're not using there. It's like
Yeah.
so there's pros and cons. Like I said, this is working for me, and I'm pretty careful about what I attach as like static properties to my service classes. But again, you can use whatever convention you want. I think just having layer in the name of whatever variables you bind these things to is probably helpful. Somebody asked in chat, why not use why not use why not use layer as a prefix? You could. It's totally arbitrary. I don't like layer as a prefix because I want my layers to be like if it is something like the middleware layer that I showed you before, I prefer to be able to import like webhook middleware layer. Like I prefer to start typing webhook blah 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 and get the autocomplete for the layer versus typing layer and having like 1,000 things show up like I showed before with the lowercase version. Again, I would just like recommend coming up with a convention that works for you and going with it. This is what's working for the effect team right now. Not necessarily static properties, but using layer as a suffix, and then for like module scoped layers using like the lowercase variant here. But anyway,
again, there is no correct or wrong way. It's just like conventions or
there's
trade-offs.
at the end of the day, it comes down to what do you prefer to name your variables. Like we can't dictate that. All I will say is that
mine are better.
All I will say is mine is the best. One, I hate live. Like anytime I go into a code base and we have live all over the place, I'm like, man, we created a virus. It's a problem. Like it's a virus of our own making, but I hate live. Like I think it does not describe anything about what's going on. But that's just me. And then the other thing I will say is the default naming from V3, in my opinion, was such a mistake. Like I hate the default and default without dependency is like I think that was such a dumb naming scheme from effect.service. But at the time we thought it was a good idea. But then like, as we started using it, we realized it really didn't make a lot of sense. So
And in the YouTube chat, there is a follow-up regarding the question, and the question is like, but the default layer you are exporting, does it include sibling services in its layer, and those include siblings, or is it only child services? Not fully sure what you mean by child services, but
I think I
I'd
know.
say that. But if you mean by child services, you mean like the one that you are producing plus the one that were required in order to produce that. I would say that usually I include only the one that you produced. Service map default life tag.
FIWS, I think today might be the day.
Yeah.
Today might be the day that we drop the ban hammer. I can actually
It's just
report you instead of banning you. I could just keep reporting you every time you troll me.
it's just a shame that you didn't include layer and context in the name.
Yeah, we need more layer. I think that the question about child versus sibling services has to do with like the dependencies and what like that means. So let's take a step back. Let's do this. Let me see if I can fix this service really quick. To at least not give me type errors. Can I just do this? Yeah, okay. Okay, so if we look at this layer, this layer has GitHub events, which it produces. It does not fail with any errors when it's being constructed, and it requires a bunch of things. You guys can ignore the Cloudflare stuff in here. This is from Alchemy, which I think at a future office hours we'll do like a lot more discussion about Alchemy. But like, I love Alchemy. I think it is such a fantastic way to reason and think about and deploy infrastructure. Like it is so nice to use, and it is so nicely built into Effect or built with Effect. So like it integrates well with your Effect programs. So at a future office hours, we'll talk more about this, but like Alchemy is very good. Go take a look if you haven't yet. The service of interest here is the GitHub Events repo. So GitHub Events, the service, needs a GitHub Events repository. So, and you can ignore the pull request labeler thingy because this is something I was working on. But this layer no deps means that I'm not satisfying the dependencies of this layer. So this GitHub Events repo, I would consider this, I guess, to use the parlance that the person from YouTube said, this would be like I hesitate to use the word sibling and child. I think a better way would be you can have sibling layers, right? Things that are merged together, layers that are merged together would have multiple outputs in the this channel here. And then you can have requirements. So like I think in the person from YouTube was saying that sibling layers would be things that are like ORed together here, are unioned together here, and child layers would be like the requirements. But again, I don't think that's the like right terminology. There's what a layer produces and what a layer requires, and that's it. So this layer produces GitHub events and it requires GitHub events repo. So I have two layers here. I have one that does not satisfy any requirements, and then I have one that is not working currently. One that is satisfying everything except for like the Alchemy stuff, because the Alchemy stuff is later. But this layer here would be the one where I've like satisfied the dependencies. I've provided this, I've erased the local dependencies in this layer. So like when you hear us talking about like try as much as you can to erase local dependencies where possible, this is where I do it, right? This second layer, I locally provide the GitHub Events repo to the GitHub Events service. And the reason is because it makes composition at the root of your app like much easier. Instead of having to pipe together a bunch of layers in the root of your app and like do a bunch of providing and like figure out how to satisfy a bunch of dependencies, you can just merge a bunch of layers together and then provide whatever's missing. And it doesn't work in 100% of circumstances, but where you can satisfy dependencies locally, we recommend it. And again, with this pattern here, you retain the flexibility of in tests still having a layer that didn't have any requirements included, right? So like in tests, if I want to have a different mock implementation of GitHub Events repo, I could do that. Like a child, okay, wait. Like a child service would be defined inside the module folder of its parent, not exported out of it, I guess. So
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 child.
I wouldn't think of things in terms of child and parent services. That's not a proper way to think of like the layers and how they're composed together. I get like what you're saying, but it's not semantically correct. GitHub events repo in this example is a requirement. It's a dependency of GitHub events. It's not a child, it's a dependency. So where possible, erase all dependencies locally, not just ones that are only used by this service, but like all of them, right? If I had a drizzle requirement in my app, and let's just say that this service used it, if I could provide the drizzle layer here too, I might do that. I don't know. I think erasing, because again, layers are memoized. So as long as by reference, so as long as you've got the same reference to that layer, you can provide it as many times as you want, and it doesn't matter. So if drizzle has to be constructed dynamically and in the main function of my app, that's a different story, because then the reference changes and I can't provide it statically here. And when I say dynamically, I mean, do I have to call like a function to construct drizzle, that layer, right? If this is the case, right, and I'm in like the main of my app to do this, right? This is a totally different story. But most of the time you can work around this, right? You can make this layer referentially equal in your app. For example, like, if you have to read config to construct drizzle, you could read your config here, dot whatever, and then return your drizzle layer from the config, and then, do layer dot unwrap. And this will unwrap the drizzle layer that needs an effectful constructor to be like, it needs to read stuff from the outside world to be constructed, but now we're turning it into a referentially equal layer. It's not possible in 100% of circumstances, but like there are ways to work around it. But my point is, if it's possible for you to erase a dependency locally, I recommend it, unless like it just doesn't make any sense. Like if you want to start with just erasing dependencies which are only used by that service, then fine. Like that's a good way to start to get like used to erasing dependencies locally. But in general, our recommendation is erase all dependencies that you can locally, because it makes layer composition at the root much simpler. Otherwise, like if I go into my main here, which is my Cloudflare worker, like these layers would get out of hand real fast, right? Like, where is my GitHub events layer? Here. I don't know why there's a layer or a die in here. Instead of just being able to provide like this layer, and then like that's it. Excuse me. The layer composition here would start to get really complicated, because then I'd have to pipe together like a GitHub events repo.layer, and then like let's say there was another service in here where I had to do that. Oh, sorry, this would be a layer.provide. And you can see, like, even with just this one example, this starts to get really unwieldy. But if you've erased dependencies locally as much as you can, like the composition of layers becomes a lot easier. It's why we recommend it. It's to keep the main of your app from getting like out of hand. And in most cases, if you do it right, you'll end up with a main layer where you can sort of just merge together a bunch of services and then provide what they need. Like, I'm not really doing things like super cleanly here, but like I could just have a services layer where I do layer.merge all, right? And I have like GitHub events.layer and maybe like a bunch of others later. And then I just include that here in the main layer. So it's like, instead of this, I would do like services layer, right? My HTTP layer uses my services layer, which requires my database layer. And again, like if I wanted to, I could erase even more dependencies from services layer by going in here and providing the database. So it's the reason we recommend doing this is to keep layer composition in main a little more manageable. How can I reduce my band score? It's not possible. It's simply not possible at this point. I mean that GitHub Events repo is an internal implementation detail of the provided GitHub Event service. Yes, it is in this case, but like it's not necessarily. Like right now it is, but maybe it would be used in other services down the road, right? Like it's an internal implementation.
Concern. Yeah, it's a business concern that could change over time. It's not like a technical reason.
Right. There was a question like a little while ago that I didn't answer that I should. Where is it? What is
It's funny that Lloyd replied exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, we make FIWS host the cluster stream, and we'll attend and troll the heck out of him instead. There was a question about what layer.mock is. We can take a quick peek. So let's go back to let's go back here and let's look at layer.mock. So it is a way. So we often got the feedback that people had services that only required implementing, like in order to test that service, you only needed to provide like one or two methods. Like, so for example, a good example here is like the file system service, right? Let's say you have like a, I don't know, a file system cache service. And this file system cache service uses file system dot read, I forget what read string, read string. I forget what the methods are called. File system, write string, whatever they're called. Well, if you have something like this, you don't really want to implement the whole file system to test file system cache. So what you can do instead is layer.mock file system. I need to get the tag file system. And then here, you have like a bunch of things, and you notice that they're all optional. So you can provide a partial implementation of this service. I think there are some things that are required. Sync. Why is sync required? Interesting. Oh, it's because it returns a sync, not an effect. We should probably fix that. I think that mock only allows, like right now it's on the type level only allowing you to mock effects, but we can just do sync.
It mocks only effects, and I think functions returning effects. What is
never? What is the thing that is there a drain? There we go.
You can also use whole, for example, from the function module.
Whole.
If I recall correctly, yeah.
So now you can mock out like read file string and write file string here to do something specific for your test. Like maybe you want to take the path and, you know, hoist it into your test and like make sure the path was XYZ shaped or something like that. I don't know. But you can implement just these two methods, right? Files, write file. Right, file string. So you can implement these two methods, effect.void. I know this isn't gonna compile right now, but like you could just implement these two methods, and now you have a mock layer that you can provide, and it will satisfy file system. If you try to use methods in your tests that are not implemented here, you'll get an error raised. But this kind of just makes it a little bit easier to mock out complex services when you only need like one or two methods implemented to test that service. rid of all this stuff. I cannot host it because I do not understand how it works. Yeah, well, that's going to be, I guess, part of the 24-hour stream is figuring out how it works.
It's called learning in public.
Is there anything in platform for building a virtual file system? No, but I know Sebastian was working on something to that degree. In effect, small. Let me see if I can find the PR, actually. And then I'll let Lloyd go bother Sebastian. Nothing like bothering Sebastian. File system. I think there was like an in-memory file system he was working on or something. There's in memory. I don't know where it is, but I know that Sebastian had a pull request open at some point. Anyway, go bother Sebastian. He had ideas for this. And maybe you can force him to finish his work. He loves opening draft PRs.
Who doesn't?
Anyway. What else? If I recall correctly, there's something about it in the live store. I remember a PR from Igor with it. There might be. But we don't maintain live store, so.
Oh yeah, found it. Add with memory system. There was it.
Send it to Lloyd. Alrighty, let's see. What time is it? It's 11:30. So we're circling in on the end of, not gonna lie, such learning in a public stream would be fun. It would be even more fun because I'd get to sit there and troll FIWS the entire time. It would be so good. Be so good. I highly recommend doing this stream.
Yeah. So Lloyd, I have posted the link for the PR in the Discord channel.
I think we've been going for about an hour and a half, so we'll probably end here, especially because there's no more questions. But feel free to post some more questions in Discord if you folks have them. Yeah.
And again, remember, if you find something that it's missing in V4 that you had in V3, or something that you don't feel good how it's shaping V4 beta compared to what was V3, or new APIs that you think that are missing, again, it's now the time to open your issues. We are basically waiting for your feedbacks as well.
Well, thank you all very much for coming to Office Hours. We will see you next week for Office Hours 39.
Yes.
Cheers, folks.
So,
have a good one.
Cheers. Bye-bye.